Hi there, and thank you for joining us. Our program explores the inner journey of people who actively seek more. Our shows have primarily been around awareness, with our guests sharing elements of their journeys with us. We focus on awareness because that is the basis for any action that we take. We must seek awareness on what is and why it's that way. Because without understanding, how can we reliably make any other choices that reflect what we want, feel, and believe? No two stories are alike, and different people make different choices. That's not a surprise. And so let's focus here for a bit on the choices that people make. Not to change in direction, more to build on where we're at. Because anytime our awareness increases, we're better informed, and our choices reflect that. I can tell you that my approach in the past was primarily one of hit and miss, and therefore the success I achieved was also hit and miss. My career choices, they honored only the short term. I was told that my short-term needs were the same cryptic ones as other people's, and that seemed to make sense. At the same time, I knew that my needs were not the same, nor were they being met. However, anytime we accept others' values for our lives, it makes it easier. And in my case, it made it a lot easier because now I was at least playing the same game as everyone else. Naturally, the same behaviors were all I envisioned for my longer-term vision as well as my short-term ones. For me, it was easier to act than to understand. While I knew enough to desire both, doing and acting is what produces visible, immediate results, worthy of validation. It seemed like the right approach. After all, everything I understood about the business world seemed to always have action at its core. I can see now that my choices for those seasons of my life reflected what I chose to accept and believe, which were the things that others, out of love, believed to be right for me. Today, I primarily use my own understanding of things as they could be to inform my choices. My success ratio at times may still seem hit and miss, and that's okay. Because this time around, my choices reflect who I am and what's important to me. And joining us today is Diane Dupuy, a member of the Order of Canada and founder and artistic director of the internationally renowned Famous People Players. Diane's commitment to the arts and to her special players has gained the highest respect and accolades around the world. Diane has used sheer will, power, and determination to bring out the best for all who come in contact with the Famous People Players. Diane founded the company in 1974 and joins us today. Diane, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Well, listen, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks, Diane. Diane, as we talk about In More, I kind of really want to get a sense of some of the influencers that have been most apparent throughout your life. And I know I've read from a prior interview that you've done just about some of the influence that academia had on you. And I'm wondering if could you share that a little bit with us about how that's impacted you, your academics or school?
Well, you know, I was born into a very creative family because my mother and my father were artists. So our home was color, painting outside the lines, nothing was restricted. Use your imagination. And being born with the backyard of the escarpment of Hamilton, I mean, I was Robin Hood one day, the Lone Ranger the next, and it was wonderful climbing trees. And the first day of school that I went to, I was psyched to go because I remember my mother, she made me a dress, she got me a pair of shoes, and I was going to make friends, and it was going to be wonderful. And I knew how great my life was at home with creativity, so I expected school to be, wow, right out there. And you know, I walked into the classroom, and I don't know what I did that day. I did something bad, and the nun came up and slapped me right across the face. And I was so humiliated and so full of shame. And I wanted to break down and cry, but I noticed all these eyes in the classroom were staring at me like a spotlight beating down on my face. And I felt like a total loser. And you know, when you're not a hit with the teacher, you're not a hit with the classmates. Yeah. So I didn't have any friends at school. Aww. And that was difficult. And that was the beginning of mental regression for me, too, because I went through the physical motions of going to school, but I never was there. I was in another world all the time.
Wow.
Yep.
And so how did you kind of choose to allow what you noticed during the schooling years to influence you later on? The creativity piece everything. Did you ever kind of consider swapping it or leaving it behind?
Well, you know, the interesting part about it is that as a child, you know, and living in the escarpment, I guess, of Hamilton, and I say the escarpment because I had a tree and I played with leaves. I didn't have toys. Nature was my love and passion. I could go outside and play for hours and be so entertained. And that's using your imagination. So when you get yourself into an awkward situation like I do today, I go to that place. I go to that tree or those leaves or something, and I try to make something out of that is nothing into something. Children today are nature deficit disorder. They don't have that wonderful nature to go on. They're concrete. They play in a playground that's concrete. They live in a home. So it's difficult for them. And toys, computers, toys, everybody has answers. Mm-hmm. But for me, we had nothing. And so you used your inner core, your imagination. You listened to your heart. You listened to that feeling inside you, and that's what guides you, your intuition.
So I hear that what you're saying in terms of the role that voice played in the imagination, the creativity, and you're lucky to have had that. So many don't, and they don't have an outlet. How did your choices kind of from there take off using those values?
Well, first of all, because I was bullied in school, I don't like seeing someone else bullied today. And when I was asked to do a show for people who were at that time called retarded, would I do it? I didn't want to do it because I thought, well, you know, I'm going to be with them. People will definitely think I'm retarded. But the lady was very persistent. And I went, and it changed my life because they didn't have a voice. And I had the courage to be able to be the voice for them. But as for me, I couldn't do it for me.
Well, so what did you choose then at that moment? When you chose to not necessarily do it for you, for stigma reasons or whatever that was, how did you make your choices?
You know, it just comes from here. It's like saying when you hear a piece of music, what makes you think of an orange, or what makes you think of this, or what makes you think of that? It's so hard to explain that to you.
It is, but that's exactly why the show exists, and that's why I'm so excited to have you as a guest, because you're so open, because it doesn't have to be so mystical. And what we're trying to do is take out the demystification of it all, right? And say, actually, we can know, and to the degree that we know, bada bing, bada boom. As you kind of...
Well, everybody has it. Everybody has this creative core inside them, everybody. And you just have to sit still and you have to listen to it. And it will grab you, and the next thing you know, you follow it. And you build from there. You build from there.
No, that's fair, and that's great. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute to speak with Diane. Thank you. Please stay tuned.
What are you learning from the broadcasts you watch? What information are you getting? Dex TV brings you focused economic news from our correspondents around the globe. More than charts and graphs, we broadcast hundreds of interviews every week, giving you a different viewpoint on the most relevant stories. Our purpose is clear: to provide you with the tools and the information you need to make informed economic decisions. Visit us at dex.tv.
Welcome back to more. I'm Sheba Varghese, and I'm speaking today with Diane Dupuy, president and co-founder of Famous People's Players in Toronto. Talked about some of the choices that you made, and maybe a different way to kind of answer the same question is to look at what were the options that you ever considered. I mean, I keep hearing the creativity and the imagination and what a powerful influence that it had on you. When you kind of looked out at the world ahead of you and blue skied it a bit, what were some of the choices that you considered? Or options you considered?
Well, In working in famous people players, the first thing is to go with, you have to go with what the audience wants. And I mean, that's your first choice. I mean, that's where I always go to, is the people. The people in our middle name. That's why it's 2 font sizes larger.
But we're
it's
talking
caps.
before we even got to that, because I mean, clearly that shows in terms of how you run the theater. And that's an outside thing. I'm curious about, how did Diane choose for Diane?
I never wanted to fail. I failed in school. I was humiliated throughout all of school. When I failed grade 3 and told in black and white on a report card that I'm a failure, I believed that. And then when I saw a girl, and it all goes within a moment, who had a terrible seizure where her skirt wrapped around her neck and everybody laughed. And I was where the first time that I can remember in my life where something hit here that I could stand up and fight for her, but I closed up for myself. And those choices today, and in anything that I do in life, I always have those feelings. They're still there. Everything stems for me from when I was a child. Everything. And that's, I guess, when you say choice, left, you go right. How do you make your choice? I guess I sit down on an invisible park bench. I sit there and I think, well, wait a second, do I go left or do I go right? What would be the consequences if I go left? What would be the consequences if I go right?
There you go.
And whatever choice that you make in your life, there is a consequence for it, good or bad. And I'm just very fortunate that I didn't fall into the world of addiction, because I could have very easily. And there was, and I see a mountain, and I see it's a struggle, and I know that I got to climb each rock, and I got to do one, and I'm going to slide down, and I'm going to land flat on my butt. That's why I have a flat butt today. But I do that, and I have to pick myself up, and I get a lot of that, I'll be honest, from my mother. My mother's 92, and she's a survivor. And you know, as you survive when you have a father who was an alcoholic, and he used to lock me in a dark basement for punishment. I could have been afraid of the dark, or I could have embraced the dark. I embraced the dark. How did I do that? Okay? I would honestly have to say it goes back to always knowing or being instilled when you're a child that there's a guardian angel in your life. Yes. You're not alone.
Great.
You can feel it. And the next thing you know, I created in the dark. And through the dark, you find the light. Okay. And there are times we have our darkest moments, but it just takes one candle to light the way. So choices are made on that. And I got to tell you, I believe very strongly that God speaks through people. So when you say to me, we met for a reason, I'm thinking about something that happened to me today that's very private, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? We did meet for a reason. And that you'll learn about down the road. And that we're all teachers for each other. Yeah. And we all learn from each other. Yeah. You have to listen, because you see all the worlds before you. All the people are there. And so they come in and they surround you and everything. And that goes with anything in life. Business, especially business. How do you make your choices in business? Do you want to do what's right for you, or do you want to do what's right for what you stand for?
So now, you talked about faith, and you've talked about creativity, and you've talked about hope, and all of those have been kind of, I guess, life jackets for you, if you will, that kind of helped you get through things. So as things started to progress and as you started to go along, do you remember noticing any other values that kind of came out really strongly for you as drivers? You said your mother's survival instincts. So survival was obviously something that you only accepted as
it's something we had to do. We were trained on that work ethics when we were very young and little. Like, you know, you just get out there and you work, and you work really hard. Always been trained on that. I mean, I was basically, I can say that's how I was raised.
So now I'm hearing a lot of forced choices because it was a survival thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now when we start looking at the free choices, what do you kind of notice that your free choices would start to be reflective of? Can you, or is that too candid a response? I'm not trying to mock this whole idea of it's so nice and clear cut and you can always know turn left here, turn right there. Obviously, that's hugely simplistic for me to even ask the question that way. But it's really just to focus on how did your life, how did it get to where it's at? Because every moment of every day you're in choice. So I'm curious at how those choices support you and what you're all about.
It's like improv, an improv, where you get a group of people together and you watch someone does this and all of a sudden you do that, you know, or vice versa. Comedy versus tragedy, more or less. It's all like in the creation of an artist decides to, when they're going to paint a painting, maybe in his mind he's already made his choice, already in his heart he's going to draw a flower. But somehow, something in the paint changes that. He starts to draw the flower and he sees a drip going this way. And he starts to follow that drip. And the next thing you know, he's got a whole different picture. How do you end up where you are? You have a set plan. I'm going here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I sometimes write, I do to-do list, I have a laborious to-do list, right? And I work at it. And I got to do this. But you know what? That I start here and I end up going over here and I end up there and I'm going, at the end of the day I've got a whole new list.
So that flexibility and open-mindedness has clearly had to be a huge part of your life. So where does flexibility and the need to be open-minded, how does that kind of interface with your own wants?
Well, it's not, I was never always like that. I had to be, when I was younger, I had to be in control. I was a control freak, big time. And if I didn't have control over the whole thing, then I wasn't a success, okay? But as time went on and as I matured, slowly but slowly, I became more flexible. And how did that happen? Through bad things, when things go wrong.
And you're going to get into something really good and juicy, so I have to interrupt you now, and I apologize. We're going to take a quick break. Please come back, and we're going to pick up where we left off, I promise.
When do we cover news at Dex TV? When it's relevant and when it has context. Dex TV broadcasts live from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. the entire North American business day. We look at long-term trends by delivering proactive and purposeful coverage. For catching up on world events, The Close is Dex TV's daily finale, combining all the key news in a comprehensive end-of-day package. Our detailed archives allow you to search through all of our shows, segments, and interviews. Information when you want it, at any time, on demand. Visit us at dex.tv.
Thanks for joining us as we continue to speak with Diane Dupuy of the Famous People Players. Diane, you're so open. I really appreciate that, so thank you. So I promised we'd pick up where we left off. You're talking about your controlling ways and how you weren't always an open-minded, flexible person. Take it from there, Diane.
You know, I look back on my life and I'm surprised. I'm a different person totally, and I believe that I lived many lives in this just one lifetime.
Lucky you.
And you know, I believe in reincarnation, but I also believe that reincarnation happens constantly in the life that you're in. So you revolve and you become this person to that person. And everything that I have learned, any valuable lesson, has always been through a very big disappointment in life, a crisis, a tragedy, or all those kinds of things. You don't learn from a standing ovation. You learn from a bad review. Yeah. That's where you learn. You learn from you didn't win the election this time. Why? Find the answers. When you win, it's nice. It's a wonderful thing. We won a lot in my life. I won a lot. But I'll tell you, the greatest lessons I've learned have been when I failed, and I'm grateful for that.
But now you're tying that into the need to be flexible, and how choices really are arbitrary kinds of things? Like, what are, in a way, what I'm hearing, and please correct me because I'm obviously hearing wrong, is that choosing isn't really necessary, or is something's just going to happen? I'm sorry, I don't really know.
Well, you do. You have to choose. You have to. I find, for me, where I sometimes make my biggest mistakes and where I fall is where I take a flying leap off a cliff without looking and without plotting it or anything.
But now, not literally.
But having said that, and this is where I will contradict myself now. My biggest successes in life have been from actually just saying, let's do it. But you have no experience. You don't know anything about it. You don't know what to do. I know. But it's here, and I'm just going to go out and do it.
And say that story that you shared with me when we were meeting about the boat.
The boat?
The Noah versus the Titanic.
Oh, well, one of the things is that when I was building a theater, and I have to tell you, I had more problems with people on this theater. And so we were told, you got to hire all the experts. You got to get a feasibility study. You got to do this, you got to do that. And it turned out to be a big disaster. And you know what? It ends up that, it takes, and it was an amateur that built Noah's Ark. But it was an expert that built the Titanic.
I love that. It's so true. It shuts everybody up about anything that has any kind of prerequisite. Because what is the prerequisite then? So talk about that as you look at your choices and how your life is played out and how the theater is played out. Take it whatever direction you want to take it, Diane, just in terms of where you understand what are the prerequisites in your mind for life.
I have to change.
So openness to change.
Always changing. I can't be the same. Can't be doing the same thing.
Can't be because
I'm not interested.
Yeah, it bores you.
Boredom gets into me very quickly. I think that's also the success of what we do, is that we're constantly changing the show and doing things because I can't stand to sit through it all the time. We have to do things that are different. And, and sometimes when you get yourself locked into something where your audiences and everybody want that same thing over, you have to figure out how can you give them that and make them happy, but at the same time, it makes you happy, be true to yourself, and you do it. So, we're not timely, but we are timeless. And that is very important.
That's excellent. That's great. So I lost my train of thought, so say something. I forgot what I was going to ask you, so can you just
you
say
have
something?
that problem too?
It happens.
Do you have that problem too? Oh my God, okay. But, and that's because your mind is absolutely so overloaded.
No, I'm so focused on you, Diane. I lost track of anything else I was going to say. No, but you're right. So while that's true, there's that need, I think of group behavior patterns that a dear friend who's going to be a guest in October was talking about, and how we have always two options in those kinds of situations: to conform, to be how others want us to be, or to risk ostracism and isolation. Now, how have you found that? You said you were ostracized as a young child.
I still, even though I went and did 3 years at the Gestalt Institute of Toronto to be in the now, I must tell you that even today, when you get yourself in a situation where you are groundless and fear comes knocking at the door, the door opens and hope is there. So you have to go that way. It's hard. It's very difficult, and it doesn't matter because you go, oh gee, if I go out and do that, it's a really risk taker. I remember when we went to Broadway. At that time on Broadway, there was no such thing as puppets on Broadway, no such thing as doing black light. It was plays and musicals, and everybody advised against it. It wasn't going to work. You're absolutely insane. What do you know about producing a show? You know nothing, but what the hell. I went out and got 1 million buttons with our company name and logo on it, and sold them for $1 each, made the $1 million, went to Broadway and risked it all. It was a big gamble. I was practically beside myself, nervous as anything, that everybody's right, but I am not giving up because I'm not going to prove them right. No, we won in the end. But it was a very, very difficult time.
Wow. You're a fighter, and you can definitely see your mother's traits coming out in you as you tell the story. But that's our time for today, Diane, and so I apologize that we can't hear more, but there's definitely more to hear. The role Liberace played in getting you to Vegas, just everything of where you're at. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us on the show today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The Famous People Players exist because of Diane Dupuy's awareness. Her awareness in her own creativity, conviction, and determination. These are the things that allowed her to make choices that promoted progress and possibilities for her and others, and continue to today. Any discussion around choices have to be considered in the shadow of our own awareness, because anytime we use the truth to inform us, we immediately experience a shift. And this is how the law of growth operates, another universal principle based on the fact that we're constantly creating, and it's in the consistency and content of our own thoughts that our lives are determined and actualized. A few weeks back, Dr. Kelly spoke of choices being impacted by different things at different times. And this is a very real truth in how we evolve as people. Our new choices may reflect shifts in awareness, shifts in values, and even newer, different, real pursuits for truth. All we need to be vigilant for and about is who we are and what matters most to us at key times in our lives. This directly contradicts any notion of a status quo or call for stability, because I know that we must change as people. It is through this change that we evolve into who we are meant to be. Please know that you're invited to contact us via our blog, and if you don't have anything to state, at least know that it exists as an extension of the show. And there is content there that you may even find useful. So thank you for watching the show, and please know that next week you're invited back to join us for an interview with Paul Pellegrini, President and founder of the Sussex Strategy Group. Until then, remember to only and always seek truth. Thank you.